Good morning, everybody. It is so nice to be here. I'm really happy to see a few familiar faces. Thank you. For the rest of you who don't have a clue who I am, I need to give you a little warning. I don't have any religious background. I've never been a spiritual seeker. I've never read the Bible or the Vedas, never had a lot of questions. I didn't mean to be a mystic. I really wanted to be a backup dancer for Michael Jackson. I had different plans. But the universe said, no, 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 we want you to go around talking about love. And so this is what I do now. But the only way that I have to do this is to share the truth of my experiences in these direct engagements with divine realms and divine beings. All I have to offer you is the wisdom that I glean from these experiences. And sometimes it sounds pretty big and it sounds kind of wild. But in fact, I noticed this morning on your thing, I'm just going to back up everything you said in your statement of faith this morning. So I warn you, it's going to sound big. All right. I am going to talk about love, and in particular, I'm going to talk about coming home to true love, because this is actually what I see happening right now in our world, where most of us feel like there's a lot of fracturing in our homes and in our communities, in our businesses, in our families, and most of all, in our own hearts. But for me, what I see happening is a very precious process in the going through of our path to returning home to true love. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to talk about 4 key origin points that I have experienced in my metaphysical events. And I'm going to start with the biggest origin point possible, the origins of existence itself. This is related to an event that I had many years ago in which I find myself in and as the primordial ground, the origins of the God space itself. Now, I'm going to use God and love interchangeably here, so you can just hear it in the way that feels most resonant to you. I am in and as this God source field. This field is an exquisite black void, unlike anything we know in earthly existence. It's the purity of nothingness, but it is also the purity of potential. Absolutely everything that exists in life begins first in this field of nothingness. So it's the nothing before there is something. Is this microphone okay? You good? It's the nothing before there is something, the potential for life before there's the living of life. This field has 5 key qualities. The first is there are literally no conditions in this field. It's an unconditional field. The second is every potential that's in this field is equal. Everything's equal in its possibility to exist. There's not a better or worse potential of existence. Everything's possible. Also, everything is free, ultimately, to express what it is as it is. There's no oppression or suppression in this field. It's also an entire state of oneness. Everything is in unity with everything else. And it is the ultimate in acceptance of what is. In the primordial state, everything is nothing. So these are the 5 key qualities of this primordial ground, the origins of the God space. I'm in this primordial ground as a formless speck of nothing. I'm just a speck of nothing. And as I'm in this field, there's movement. And as there's movement, I am engorged with the God source. This flow of divine love enters me and wakes me up to my first moment of conscious awareness. In fact, I am conscious awareness itself. And in this first moment, there's only one thing to be aware of, and that is, I am goodness or godness, and I want to be all that I am. And that single thought rocketed me in the evolution of my entire being. This is the same impulse that awakens all of life to existence. Everything seeks to be all of the godness that it is. And the reason that that's our impulse is because what created the movement in the primordial ground to begin with was God's own desire to experience all of its infinite life potential. And we are that life potential. So the model of existence that I was shown is that the divine flow is God seeking to experience its infinite life, and we are that life seeking to experience our infinite godness. I'm going to tie this in a little bit later. The next origin point that I want to talk about is the origins of Christianity. This is actually the very first experience I ever had, in which, this is December of 2000, I find myself in and as the body of Jesus on the cross at the moment of crucifixion. And the moment that I realize who and where I am, I'm instantly aware of everything that's been happening in the evolution of humanity, like that. And I'm acutely aware in particular of three key things. Now, this event went on for 3.5 hours, but I'm just going to mention three key things for the purpose of this talk. The first thing I was acutely aware of is what actually caused the crucifixion. And it's not what people talk about in terms of betrayal by a disciple or people in power who felt threatened. What caused the crucifixion was the momentum of a mental construct, the mindsets of conflict and fear that have been perpetuated and cultivated and entrenched century after century after century, that ultimately came to a head in its expression in the crucifixion of Christ, when the message of divine love was here to be delivered by Jesus. The second thing I was aware of was in the hearts of all of the people that were present at the crucifixion scene, I can see and experience a thread of sorrow as though it is my own. And I can see and experience that thread of sorrow stretching all the way back through time, up through the hearts of all of the humans, through the hearts of all of the people present at the crucifixion scene, and all the way into the hearts of current day humans. And the source of that thread of sorrow that stretches throughout humanity is our belief that we're separate from God, that we believe we're separate from that very flow of divine love that is the thing that gives us life. The third thing I was acutely aware of was in the death moment, I watched the evolution of Christianity from that point forward to current day, and I watched all the exploitations of my death. I watched kings and cardinals and bishops scrambling to carve out dominions in my name, century after century after century, and I saw death and destruction and domination and power struggles all over the place. There was a lot of good that came out of the evolution of Christianity. Of course there was. But it was the way that the goodness was being used that I saw. And that is, it was not being used as a healing kind of love. It was being used as a conquering kind of love. That's what I was shown. All of this was mirrored, again, years later, when I had a similar instance of understandings through the origins of Buddhism. And in that instance, I find myself in the mind of Buddha at his first moment of enlightenment. At this time, I know absolutely nothing about Buddha or Buddhism, but here I am in this grand experience. And I describe this in my book as bobbing in an ocean of everything without touching anything. Now, you can imagine, if you're bobbing deep down inside the ocean, not at the surface, but deep down inside the ocean of absolutely everything, you're one with life. Life is happening with you and through you and as you, and you're aware that you are the oneness of life. You can imagine if you're bobbing along in this beautiful way and you become snagged on something. If you become snagged on something, then you stop. And now you become identified with this location. And it doesn't feel like life is happening with you and through you and as you now. Now it feels like life is happening to you, right? And so as you're here in this location and life is happening to you, now you become more of the observer of life and everything becomes relative. And now when we were bobbing along before we snagged, we were exploring all of our godness in a manner of what we might consider contrast. But that contrast went like this. This is good, this is another kind of good. This is good, this is another kind of good. When we snagged, life felt like it was happening to us and everything became relative. Our exploration went to the mental construct from this is good, this is a different kind of good, to this is good, this is bad. And now, we want these good things to come to us, and we don't want these bad things to come to us. We begin labeling absolutely everything about life in a value category of either good or bad. And there's all of this suffering intensely with this because this is what Buddhists call the attachments and the aversions, right? And as we're assigning all of this value system to things, we also then begin assigning meanings to everything. And we begin building up all of these mental constructs of beliefs about what's happening. And the more that we build up our beliefs and our meanings and our good trumps bad model of life, the more deeply entrenched we become and identified with this location to which life is happening and everything is relevant. It's all built on mental constructs. But what we snagged on in the very beginning was mental constructs. And the first thing we snagged on was fear. In my experience, I saw it like a boulder, like we're bobbing along in this beautiful life experience. We come upon this boulder of fear and we get stuck. And then fear becomes the foundation upon which we build all of our beliefs of existence in this suffering paradigm of good trumps bad. And ultimately, that all of it we believe we're separate from the flow of life. We believe we're separate from God. You can see how all of that is mirrored in the Christian and Buddhist perspectives. The last origin point I'm going to talk about ultimately ties in everything, and for me it was the most important origin point I've ever experienced. And that is the origins of the loop of human suffering. Now, this was the basis of my entire tour last year, and I built that tour around a single question. And the question was, if love is all we need, if love is all there is, then why hasn't love ever been enough to make our suffering go away? The answer to that question lies in understanding the suffering that's inherent in the good trumps bad model of life. All of this began with a metaphysical event that I experienced April 25th of last year when I was living in the nunnery in the Himalayas, which is where I live in India. And in that experience, I encountered a block. It was in my stomach. We all have this block. It's the fundamental block in humanity. And this block consists of our belief that we're separate from love and our constant crying out for union with love. In the good trumps bad model of life, the good side of that equation is normally everything that we associate with love, right? Kindness, compassion, concern, empathy, etc. And the bad side of that equation is all of the negative things that we want our love to heal. Fear, judgment, war, poverty, etc. But we're not actually wanting our love to heal these things. We want our love to conquer them, to make them go away. And we know this because this is our traditional story paradigm. We have a protagonist and an antagonist. And the whole point of this story is that the protagonist conquers the antagonist. This is the hero's story. This is the Disney model of life. We love that. It's also the basis of religion, right? We have the moral good seeking to conquer the immoral evil. It's the basis of all of the mythological religious stories, the conquering of evil. It's the basis of all of the systems of our life that have been set up, our economics and education, governance, culture, society, everything's based on this conquering model. That's not love. That's rejection. Rejection is the very thing that makes us believe that we're separate from love. What we haven't understood in the good trumps bad model of life is that everything on that negative side of the equation, everything that we have labeled negative, is actually only a version of, an iteration of, an expression of the pain that we experience because we believe we're separate from love. And it is that pain that's driving our cry for union with love. And it is that cry that we reject by trying to make it go away. And the reason we do that is because the nature of pain is to be rejected. This is what we do with our pain. We reject it. The reason why love can't make our suffering go away is that the model of love that we're using is actually the very thing that's creating the suffering cycle. Because we're trying to make one part of life, make another part of life go away. We want that which we've labeled good to make that which we've labeled bad disappear. That's not love. That's rejection. In this block that we all carry, this fundamental block of humanity, what we believe we're separate from is not the mental construct of love that humans usually use. What we deeply believe we're separate from is divine love. And it is the pain that we experience in that separation belief that is driving our constant crying out for the presence and union with divine love. And it is that we reject in the good trumps bad model of life. That's not love. What we're seeking is that response, that presence that considers everything unconditional, equal and free and unified, and everything just is. This is what we're seeking. This is what we believe we're separate from, and that's what we're crying out for. When all of these pieces fell together during my metaphysical event, I knew what my work was. I knew what the piercing process of that block was. I knew to pierce the boundaries of that block, to have everything open up and be healed, for that cry to be responded to, I knew what my work was. My work was to get my own field, my own being in direct alignment with God, in direct alignment with my own true nature. I literally said in that moment, anything that comes into or arises in my awareness, in my field, I will accept here unconditionally. Anything that comes into or arises in my field, I will allow here as an equal in possibility and potential to exist. Anything that comes into or arises in my field of awareness is free to express what it is as it is. I will not oppress or suppress. Anything that comes into or arises in my field, I will accept unconditionally as the oneness and the unity of all that I am. I will accept in this present moment anything that comes into or arises in my field of awareness. And the moment that I hit that mark, the moment that I was in direct alignment with God, with my own true nature, what happened then was everything on that negative side of the equation in the good trumps bad model of life, the long list of things that we label negative, one at a time, they started coming around, rising up in the awareness of my field. And the first thing up was fear. And when fear hit this divine field in me, what happened was this. Bam! There was this huge explosion of all the expression of the fear that I was holding, all of the subtle nuances, all of the rage and blame and resentment and everything that fear was holding, all of my life, not just this life, all of my existence, and not just my existence, but all the ways I was ever interwoven or entangled with the collective of humanity. I saw every speck of fear that I had ever held in humanity. And then, underneath it, all the pain that that fear was holding in my life, in my existence, and in the collective of humanity that I had put there because of my relationship with fear. I was so stunned. Every speck of pain that I could see was like a living entity looking back at me, knowing that I had rejected it. It was stunning. The scale was unfathomable. And I started to sob and sob and sob. I just kept saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And eventually I got to the place where all I could say was, please forgive me. It was a request to myself, to the collective, and most of all, to that pain. Please forgive me. When I got to that point where all I could say was, please forgive me, what happened to that pain and all of that fear in my divine field was this. And it was just absorbed into the divine field. The cry had been answered. And then right behind that, boom, here's judgment. Same process. All of the judgment, all of existence, collective of humanity, the sobbing, the I'm so sorry, please forgive me. This went on and on and on for days. But eventually I got to a place where I felt like this cleansing, this healing at this point in my life was complete. And I knew when I was working on this, I knew this was going to be the work that I had to take out into the world. And that was made very clear to me with all of the divinity that was working with me in this metaphysical event. I had a cosmos full of divine light working with me. And they all said, this is the work of the universe. There's this work, and all other work falls away. I knew that this was going to be what I needed to take out on the road, and then all of the resources to make that happen just showed up really easily. A big chunk of money to start a tour came out of the blue, and invitations for talks and interviews and everything on international websites were coming, just nonstop. I had movie offers. My book is now being made into a movie. I had publication offers. I mean, it was just so simple. I didn't have to do anything except go tell my truth. So I went around to 30 different cities in the US, and the UK, and France, telling only this story with this talk. And it was wildly popular. People were following me from event to event. They were listening to my interviews thousands of times. Every day I was getting emails about, oh my God, this healing is amazing. It was wildly popular. And I had only one takeaway message in that talk, only one. And the takeaway message was, once we understand the suffering that's inherent in the good trumps bad model of life, we have only one thing that we have to do. That's it, just one. And that one thing is the inquiry of willingness. Am I really willing to be the presence of divine love that answers the cry and ends the suffering inherent in our good trumps bad model of life? Am I really willing to be that radically transparent within myself, to ask myself, am I really willing to be unconditional about everything? Am I really willing to allow everything as an equal and free and unified, accepted part of life? Am I really willing to do that within me? I'm going to repeat that takeaway message. Am I really willing to be the presence of divine love that answers the cry and ends the suffering inherent in the good trumps bad model of life? 3 days after I end that wildly successful tour, a man named Trump wins the US election. And then, every day since then, the world has been living with a spotlight shining on the pain that's inherent in the suffering we experience in the good trumps bad model of life. We all know the signs that came out with the best of intentions in response. Love trumps hate. Good trumps evil. With the best of intentions, that's the very paradigm we went right to. The concept of Trump, the mental construct of Trump, the man Trump, became the #1 thing on the planetary radar screen 3 days after I end my wildly successful tour talking about the suffering that's inherent in the good trumps bad model of life. Isn't that spectacular? I was so shocked. From the mystical perspective, here's what's happened. And it's all good. I also said in my talk last year that it's very easy to see how the presence and awareness of divine love has been growing and expanding, encircling our planet more and more and more, infusing into the energies of our planet more and more and more and more. And as this has happened, as this divine awareness has been growing up, it's allowed everything and all the pain from within humanity to rise up to be met. You can see these signs of the awareness of divine love very easily. This all started well over a century ago in earnest, but it's really accelerated in the last few decades. The signs are very clear. We all know that there's been pervasive teachings and discussions around unconditional love. Not just in religion, but all sectors of society are now talking about unconditional love. We all know that there have been pervasive movements towards equality at rocket speed relative to what we've been for eons in all categories all around the planet. We know that there have been pervasive movements towards freedom of expression, freedom to be who we are as we are. Look what the internet has allowed us to do. Look what the transgendered community is ushering. It's so beautiful, the boundaries being pushed on freedom of expression. We all know that there have been pervasive teachings and discussions around oneness, unity, right? We know that there have been pervasive discussions and teachings about acceptance of what is. Entire industries have been built on the power of now. These are all the signs of the presence and awareness of divine love. This is what's been soaking into our planet more and more and more and more. And as it soaks in, it's opened up these flowing channels of energies, allowing all of that pain from deep within humanity to come up to be met by that response. You see? This summer, after events in Charlottesville, I made a video in which I said, the sheets are off for all of us now. We're seeing each other eye to eye, feeling each other heart to heart, and this radical transparency is such an important part of our spiritual awakening. There's no denying our pain. There's no denying what is deep within humanity. None of this stuff just started. None of it just started. It's all been here. There's no denying the extent of our pain. Sometimes that pain is expressed as pride and boastfulness that we're finally being heard. And sometimes that pain is expressed as blame and resentment. And, oh my God, how can you even think that? It's no surprise that we have a rise and escalation in gun violence and sexual harassment awareness and gender violence and racial violence. It's no surprise. This is all of our truth. It's okay to feel whatever we feel because this is our truth. And it's okay to feel what we feel because this is not our stopping point. Our work is in the response to everything that we see and everything that we feel. As long as we continue to respond from the place of mental constructs from which the pain is coming in the first place, we continue that momentum of pain. But now we know that we're able to respond from the presence of divine love. And in that response, an infinite array of options open up for alternatives to what's happening. And I'll give you a very easy example. Malala Yousafzai. Malala Yousafzai was the 12-year-old girl who was shot in the head by the Taliban in Pakistan for promoting education for girls. Malala was once asked, "Do you know who shot you? Do you know the person who shot you?" And she said, "I wasn't shot by a person. I was shot by an ideology." She knew that her response could not be that same ideology of domination and power. She did not go to the United Nations and say, "We need to resist, we need to fight the Taliban." She went to the United Nations and said, "We need to make education for girls a priority." You see the difference? Her response was aligned with divine love, with equality and freedom and unity. We all have this power to make a profound ripple by our individual efforts, a profound ripple. And I'll give you a very easy way to see that. I'm going to use you as an example, dear Tracy. Let's say that we have an energy of conflict. Tracy did something really bad to me. It's all her fault. In this energy of conflict, I love you. In this energy of conflict, what energy looks like from a metaphysical perspective, if you can imagine the vibrations look like threads, that's easy to imagine. In the energies of conflict, it looks like a knotted thread. When we're in this energy of conflict, we have wound this knotted thread around us very, very tightly. And as we walk around in our conflict energies of blame and victimhood and anger and all of this, we're just knotting that thread up tighter and tighter. We're pushing and pulling against each other very dramatically. And I'm on my end talking to people about how terrible Tracy has been in this instance. And I'm taking these little subsidiary threads and I'm wrapping them around everybody who I'm saying, "Oh my God, you would not believe what she did." And I'm just making sure that they're on my side and I'm doing all of this. She's on her end doing exactly the same thing, taking these little subsidiary threads and wrapping them around all of the people that she's telling how awful I've been in this situation. And now we're all in this massive entanglement of knotted threads, the conflict energies. From a planetary perspective, this is what we've looked like. One great big bundle of just knotted, entangled threads of conflict. And as you can imagine, that doesn't vibrate very high. You can't really flow well in that energy. In this example, if I, in this situation, am willing to go in and I really get to the depths of my own behavior, the truth, the radical transparency inside myself, to look at how I've behaved, how I responded, the pain that I was trying to reject in my own situation. And I get to that point of authentic forgiveness. And that's not forgiveness of Tracy, because that would be me judging her that she did something wrong. That forgiveness is always only for me in the way that I've seen things and what I've tried to reject in this situation. When I get to the point of authentic forgiveness, what happens to that knotted thread around me is that all of the knots just open up and dissolve. And now this thread begins to drop away and flow. And as it drops away from me and opens up and flow, now Tracy has nothing to push and pull against me. So naturally the thread begins to fall away around her. And it's doing the same thing with everybody that I've wrapped my little threads around. It's doing the same thing around all of the people that she had her thread around. And now all of us are experiencing this massive open flow of energy, all because I did my work. This is what's happening around the planet. More and more and more of us have been going in and doing our individual work and opening up these channels of energies to open up and flow, and the ripple effects have been phenomenal. And all of this has opened up these channels for the ability for all of the pain from deep within humanity to come up and be met with this divine presence, the response of divine love. This is what's happening in our world. I want to anchor this in with an understanding of how oneness equates to ourselves being the home to which everything is returning, just within ourselves. It's very easy to understand. We have to think differently, and I'm going to help you get there. In this understanding of oneness, I can ask you very simply, where do you see me? Where do you experience me? You probably think, well, I experience you up there. I see you up there. The only place that you see me, the only place that you experience me, is inside of you. It can't be any other way. You're taking in this reflection of light, you're interpreting it, and you're getting this outcome of dimension and location and somebody named Mary up here. But all of that's happening is everything only inside of you. And I can tell you how I know this. Several years ago, I was getting ready for bed. I had on a pink top. I took off my top and I laid it over the back of a chair. And I walked across the room and something made me turn around, and suddenly the room is just the energy field that we all exist in. I've seen this field numerous times. It's a beautiful infinite continuum of colors and patterns and speeds and directions and all of these things going on. But this time there was an added dimension. I was watching this field of which I am a part. I'm watching it enter through my left eye, and I'm taking in all of this data, and I'm watching me take in the data, and I'm watching it travel through my nervous system. Boop, 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 boop. And as I'm taking in these patterns of which I am a part and interpreting it with these patterns, things begin to coalesce, pixelate into the reality that makes me believe that I'm seeing pink in the shape of a top on a chair over there. All of that happened only inside of me. I was at one with the field that's being interpreted. I'm at one with the being that is interpreting, and I'm watching all of it at the same time. This is the oneness of life. This is what's happening with all of us right now, but we can't perceive it. But nonetheless, that's what's happening. I can take this a little further with you. You can imagine if you close your eyes and I stop talking, you only have a memory of me. But where is that memory? It's inside of you. If you keep your eyes closed and all you can hear is my voice, where are you hearing me? Inside of you. If you were to bite into a carrot, the taste of that carrot is inside of you. It's not inside the carrot. You can't taste a carrot that's in the ground because you're not at one with that carrot. You see? If I were to place my cold hands on your arm, the sensations that you feel are coming from the sensations on your own skin, not from me. You can't feel the sensations of my coldness if I'm up here because you're not at one with me. You see? If I tell you on the way here we saw a terrible car crash, you might have empathy for the car crash victims, but you had no empathy until you had an internal awareness of something that required an empathetic response. Nothing's happening except inside of you. This is the oneness of life. You are at one with existence. Once you understand this, then you can think about, in our world today, when you experience other people's hatred or violence or anger, where are you experiencing that? Inside of you. Where must you process that? Inside of you. Somebody else can't process what you're experiencing. Only you can. Where can you respond to this? Only inside of you. There's no other place from which to respond to the world, to anything. Now think about all of the things that we're aware of that are up right now in our awareness in our world. Everything, every single thing is only happening in the awareness within our own field. And no matter how wide the continuum of all of these different iterations of pain are, every single one of them are only seeking one response. That's it. All of our pain, no matter what iteration it is seeking the response of divine love. And where is that response? Only within us. It can be no other way. Everything that we see in our world is seeking this home. This is the place of divine love. This is the place to which everything is returning. Ultimately, all we're doing right now, every single one of us, is calling ourselves home. This is what's happening in our world. When we are able to respond from the presence of divine love, this place of true love that we are, then we break the cycle of human suffering and we get back to the business of exploring all of the godness that we are. This is the place from which we do this. What we've been exploring all this time is that endless loop of human suffering. We break that cycle in our living in this home of the presence of divine love, and then we get back to the business of the exploration of all of our godness. This is what we're doing right now in our world. This is the presence that we're at right now in our world. It's such an exciting time when we can see the purpose of all of this. This is all the time that I have for this morning, but afterwards we're going to have a little bit of a workshop and an exercise in which I'm going to very easily show you how you can see where you're identified with the mental constructs of living and how to feel into and identify how to respond to life in the presence of divine love that you already are. It's a very simple, profound exercise, and I look forward to taking you through that. So this is all I have time for. Thank you so much for having me here today. May our time together be of benefit to all beings.